Hello, 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 good people. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Privileged Black Girl, aka Akiela Galore. I am your privileged black girl. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. As you can tell by the title of the live, we will be reading again. We read a couple of days ago, about 3 days ago, and it was actually pretty successful. I know that you all were here to troll me, but I flipped the script on your ass. So today we will be reading and we will have the same setup, whereas again I will start reading the book. I will not be reading the comments. Only the positive comments, honestly. So yeah, let's get started. Hey girl, how are you? How was the dentist?
Oh, girl, goose chase.
Yeah.
They ended up doing all types of weird stuff, so I just left. They had to rebook me. It was just a cleaning, but it was coming up real expensive, and they were saying something about my insurance. So I was like, look, just rebook me, because y'all don't have together. Yeah. So I'm back now.
You having a good day? Oh, I was just getting ready to read.
Oh, I know they love that.
Yeah, I'm gonna read for probably like an hour.
Okay.
What you up to today?
Honestly, nothing. Probably just class stuff, and then, I don't know. What about you?
I'm gonna read and then we'll see where we go from there. I've been socializing a lot, so we'll see.
Oh.
Yeah.
Who you socializing with?
Like people around me. Yeah,
Yeah.
people I know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just keep it up with my group. But I'll chit chat with you later. Okay, so you said what? Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. So, okay. So, hello, good people. Welcome back. Now, today we're going to read. Again, I could troll, but I want to read today. I just want to read to you all, and I am watching this. As you all are watching this, that if you just heard the conversation I was having, it was with my neighbor as she was coming back to her house. So, I am going to start reading. This is the name of the book. The name of the book is The Psychology of Money. It's by Morgan Housel. Time Lessons on Wealth, Greed, and Happiness. I've had this book for like 3 years. I got it in 2022. I even bought it for a friend, but I did not. Why? Okay. So I even bought this book for a friend, but I ended up not reading it myself. So now I'm going to start reading it. I've never read it before, so we're going to read it together. It says, I usually read like the back of the book, which has a lot of reviews on the back of it, and then it has it says House's observations often hit the daily double. They say things that haven't been said before, and they make sense. How it marks. So these are reviews from people who have read this book, and then the panel over here says, doing well with money isn't necessarily about what you know. It's about how you behave. And behavior is hard to teach, even to really smart people. Money, investing, personal finance, and business decisions is typically taught as a math-based field where data and formulas tell us exactly what to do. But in the real world, people don't make financial decisions on a spreadsheet. They make them at the dinner table or in a meeting room where personal history, your own unique view of the world, ego, pride, marketing, and all incentives are scrambled together. In The Psychology of Money, award-winning author Morgan Housel shares 19 short stories exploring the strange ways people think about money and teaches you how to make better sense of one of life's most important topics. To me, this is very important because I want to understand the psychology of money. I want to understand how to handle money better. I don't necessarily come from, I didn't come from a family of old money like the book that we previously read a couple of days ago. I did not come from old money, so I need to understand how money works, and I want to understand how to better manage it, invest it, do all those things. So that's why I originally bought this book, to understand it. I bought it for a friend. I don't know if they read it, but again, this is my first time reading it. So, The Psychology of Money, Timeless Lessons and Wealth, Greed and Happiness. The Psychology of Money. It says 4. My parents who teach me, Gretchen who guides me, Miles and Reese who inspire me. This when I first started reading the book, I usually do read over the contents of the book, even though I know I'm gonna read the book, but I like to look at the contents as well. Like the introduction says, the greatest show on earth. No one's crazy, luck and risk, never enough, confounding and compounding, getting wealthy versus staying wealthy, tells you win, freedom, man in the car, paradox, wealth is what you don't see, save money, reasonable over rational, surprise, room for error, you'll change, nothing's free, you and me, the seduction of pessimism. So, and then when you believe anything altogether now, confessions, a brief history of why the U.S. consumer thinks the way they do, end notes and acknowledgement. When reading a book, to me, I like to see all of the nitty gritty in the beginning, not just open the book and read the first chapter. So it has a quote. A genius is the man who can do the average thing when everyone else around him is losing his mind. End quote. That's by Napoleon. Quote. The world is full of obvious things which nobody by any chance ever observes. End quote. That quote is from Sherlock Holmes. Introduction. The greatest show on earth. I spent my college years working as a valet at a nice hotel in Los Angeles. One frequent guest was a technology executive. He was a genius, having designed and patented a key component in Wi-Fi routers in his 20s. He has started and sold several companies. He was wildly successful. He also had a relationship with money I'd describe as a mix of insecurity and childish stupidity. He carried a stack of $100 bills several inches thick. He showed it to everyone who wanted to see it and many who didn't. He bragged openly and loudly about his wealth, often while drunk and always apropos of nothing. One day he handed one of my colleagues several thousands of dollars of cash and said, "Go to the jewelry store down the street and get me a few $1,000 gold coins." An hour later, gold coins in hand, the tech executive and his buddies gathered around by a dock overlooking the Pacific Ocean. Then they proceeded to throw the coins into the ocean, skipping them like rocks, cackling as they argued whose went furthest, just for fun. Days later, he shattered a lamp in the hotel's restaurant. A manager told him it was a $500 lamp and he'd have to replace it. "You want $500? The executive asked, incredulously, while pulling a brick of cash from his pocket and handed it to the manager. "Here's $5,000. Now get out my face and don't ever insult me like that again." You may wonder how long this behavior could last and and the answer was not long. I learned years later that he went broke. The premise of this book is that doing well with money has a little to do with how smart and a lot to do The premise of this book is that doing well with money has little to do with how smart you are and a lot to do with how you behave. And behavior is hard to teach, even to really smart people. A genius who loses control of their emotions can be a financial disaster. The opposite is also true. Ordinary people with no financial education can be wealthy if they have a handful of behavioral skills that have nothing to do with formal measures of intelligence. My favorite Wikipedia entry begins, Ronald James Reed was an American philanthropist, investor, janitor, and gas station attendant. Ronald Reed was born in rural Vermont. He was the first person in his family to graduate high school, made all the more impressive by the fact that he hitchhiked to campus each day. For those who knew Ronald Reed, there wasn't much else worth mentioning. His life was about as low key as they come. Reed fixed cars at a gas station for 25 years and swept floors at JCPenney for 17 years. He bought a two-bedroom house for $12,000 at age 38 and lived there for the rest of his life. He was widowed at age 50 and never remarried. A friend recalled that his main hobby was chopping firewood. Reed died in 2014, age 92, which is when the humble rural janitor made international headlines. 2,813,503 Americans died in 2014. Fewer than 4,000 of them had a net worth of over $8 million when they passed away. Ronald Reed was one of them. In his will, the former janitor left $2 million to his stepkids and more than $6 million to his local hospital and library. Those who knew Reed were baffled. Where did he get all that money? It turned out there was no secret. There was no lottery win and no inheritance. Reed saved what little he could and invested it in blue chip stocks. Then he waited for decades on end as a tiny savings compiled into more than $8 million. That's it. From janitor to philanthropist. A few moments. This is a very interesting read. No pun intended for Ronald Reed, but this is a good book so far. A few months before Ronald Reed died, another man named Richard was in the news. Richard Fuscone was everything Ronald Reed was not. A Harvard-educated Merrill Lynch executive with an MBA, Fuscone had such a successful career in finance that he retired in his 40s to become a philanthropist. Former Merrill CEO David Kamansky praised Fuscone's business-savvy leadership skills, sound judgment, and personal integrity. Crane's Business magazine once included him in a 40 under 40 list of successful business people. But then, like the gold skipping tech executive, everything fell apart. Hi, Chica. Thank you so much, Chica. Oh, I'm trying not to read the comments. Wait. First of all, if you're watching this and you left positive comments, thank you so much. If you're leaving negative comments right now, I'm really not listening to you. I am reading. Maybe we could troll tomorrow, like on Saturday, but it's Friday at 3:14 p.m. and I don't feel like cussing you out. I just want to read a book. I don't care what you think about my looks. I'm beautiful no matter what you say. So you can either enjoy the book and listen, or you can move along. Have a great day. But then, like the gold coin skipping tech executive, everything fell apart. In the mid-2000s, Fuscone borrowed heavily to expand an 18,000 square foot home in Greenwich, Connecticut that had 2 bathrooms, 2 elevators, 2 pools, 7 garages, and cost more than $90,000 a month to maintain. Then the 2008 financial crisis hit. The crisis hurt virtually everyone's finances. It apparently turned Fuscone's into dust. High debt and illiquid assets left him bankrupt. I currently have no income, he allegedly told a bankruptcy judge in 2008. First, his Palm Beach house was foreclosed. In 2014, it was the Greenwick Mansion's turn. 5 months later, 5 months before Ronald Reed left his fortune to charity, Richard Fusco's home, where guests recalled the thrill of dining and dancing atop a sing through covering on the home's indoor swimming pool, was sold in a foreclosure auction for 75% less than an insurance company figured it was worth. Ronald Reed was patient. Richard Fusco was greedy. That's all it took to eclipse the massive education and experience gap between the two. The lesson here is not to be more like Ronald and less like Richard, though that's not bad advice. The fascinating thing about these stories is how quite unique they are to finance. In what other industry does someone with no college degree, no training, no background, no formal experience, and no connections massively outperform someone with the best education, the best training, and the best connections? I struggle to think of any. It is impossible to think of a story about Ronald Reed performing a heart transplant better than a Harvard-trained surgeon, or designing a skyscraper superior to the best-trained architects. There will never be a story of a janitor outperforming the world's top nuclear engineers. But these stories do happen in investing. The fact that Ronald Reed can coexist with Richard Fusco has two explanations. One, financial outcomes are driven by luck, independent of intelligence and effort. That's true to some extent, and this book would discuss it in further detail. Or two, and I think more common, that financial success is not a hard science. It's a soft skill, where how you behave is more important than what you know. I call this soft skill the psychology of money. The aim of this book is to use short stories to convince you that soft skills are more important than the technical side of money. I'll do this in a way that will help everyone, from Reed to Fusco and everyone in between, make better financial decisions. These soft skills are, I've come to realize, greatly unappreciated. Finance is overwhelmingly taught as a math-based field where you put data into a formula and the formula tells you what to do, and it's assumed that you'll just go do it. That is true in personal finance, where you're told to have a 6-month emergency fund and save 10% of your salary. It's true in investing, where we know the exact historical correlations between interest rates and valuations. And it's true in corporate finance, where CFOs can measure the precise cost of capital. It's not that any of these things are bad or wrong. It's that knowing what to do tells you nothing about what happens in your head when you try to do it. Pretty much. Okay, so let's pause right there. Light our blunt. Oh. Alright, so we're gonna light our bliss. Happy Friday to all those who are watching. Happy Friday to all those who are watching. I'm enjoying reading to you all. I like reading. I really enjoy reading. That's why I have so many books. I enjoy the art of reading. I love reading. It opens my brain. I've had this book for 3 years and I never read it. You can tell by how dirty this book is. This book is so freaking dirty. It's just been passed around. I bought it when I was living in Atlanta, and then I moved here to Miami, and I brought all my books from Atlanta to Miami with me, and I've accumulated more books. I was going to read this book to you all, but then I understood that I really want to focus on understanding money. Hold on. I'm actually getting a phone call, but I will call them back. I'm not going to ignore it, though, but I'll call them back. So Yeah, again, I just want to read more. That's it. And you all can learn from this as well. So we're going to read for about 40 more minutes, and we're going to find a stopping place, and I will continue to read this book. If you've already read this book, then that's great. But yeah. I did say I'm going to spark my blunt, and I always say I'm going to spark my blunt, and then I don't like my blunt. So let me light my blunt. Happy Friday to you all. Back to reading. Two topics impact everyone, whether you're interested in them or not: health and money. The healthcare industry is a triumph of modern science with rising life expectancy across the world. Scientific discoveries have replaced doctors' old ideas about how the human body works, and virtually everyone is healthier because of it. The money industry, investing, personal finance, business planning is another story. Finance has scooped up the smartest minds coming from top universities over the last 2 decades. Financial engineering was the most popular major in Princeton's School of Engineering a decade ago. Is there any evidence it has made us better investors? I have seen none. Through collective trial and error over the years, we learned how to become better farmers, skilled plumbers, and advanced chemists. But has trial and error taught us to become better with our personal finances? Are we less likely to bury ourselves in debt? More likely to save for a rainy day? Prepared for retirement? Have realistic views about what money does and doesn't do to our own happiness? I've seen no compelling evidence. Most of the reason why I believe it is that we think about and are taught about money in ways that are too much like physics with rules and laws, and not enough like psychology with emotions and nuance. And that, to me, is as fascinating as it is important. Money is everywhere. It affects all of us and confuses most of us. Everyone thinks about it a little differently. It offers lessons on things that apply to many areas of our life, like risk, confidence, and happiness. Few topics offer a more powerful magnifying glass that helps explain why people behave the way they do than money. It is one of the greatest shows on earth. My own appreciation for the psychology of money is shaped by more than a decade of writing on this topic. I began writing about finance in early 2008. It was a dawn of a financial crisis and the worst recession in 80 years. To write about what was happening, I wanted to figure out what was happening. But the first thing I learned about the financial crisis was that no one could accurately explain what happened or why it happened, let alone what should be done about it. For every good explanation, there was an equally convincing rebuttal. Engineers can determine the cause of a bridge collapse because there's an agreement that if a certain amount of force is applied to a certain area, that area will break. Physics isn't controversial. It's guided by laws. Finance is different. It's guided by people's behaviors. And how I behave might make sense to me but look crazy to you. The more I studied and wrote about the financial crisis, the more I realized that you could understand it better through the lenses of psychology and history, not finance. To grasp why people bury themselves in debt, you don't need to study interest rates. You need to study the history of greed, insecurity, and optimism. To get why investors sell out at the bottom of a bear market, you don't need to study the math of expected future returns. You need to think about the agony of looking at your family and wondering if your investments are imperiling their future. I love Voltaire's observation that history never repeats itself. Man always does. It applies so well to how we behave with money. In 2018, I wrote a report outlining 20 of the most important flaws, biases, and causes of bad behavior I've seen affect people when dealing with money. It was called The Psychology of Money, and over 1 million people have read it. This book is a deeper dive into the topic. Short passages from the report appear unaltered in this book. What you're holding in 20 chapters, each describing what I consider to be the most important and often counterintuitive features of the psychology of money. The chapters revolve around a common theme, but it exists on their own and can be read independently. It's not a long book. You're welcome. Most readers don't finish the book. They begin because most single topics don't require 300 pages of explanation. It requires... It's not a long book. You're welcome. Most readers don't finish the books they begin because most single topics don't require 300 pages of explanation. I'd rather make 20 short points you finish than one long one you give up on. On we go. Number 1. No one's crazy. Your personal experiences with money make up about 0.000000001% of what's happened in the world, but maybe 80% of how you think the world works. That is so true. That is like so freaking true. All right. So we're going to proceed, but before we proceed, I would like to get a proper hit off my blunt, to be honest, because I just lit the blunt, but I didn't get like a really, really good hit. So I would just like to get like a really, really good hit from my blunt, if y'all don't mind. Thank you for your patience. This is a smoke, sip, and read. During the smoke, sip, and read, we smoke, sip, and read. So that's what we're going to do. Thank you for joining. Hope you're having a great Friday. I know I am. I woke up today. I was a little chatterbox on Snapchat. So if you follow me on Snapchat, shout out to everyone who follows me on Snapchat. They got a quick story time before I got here on YouTube. A story time that I won't put on my YouTube because certain people be watching me on YouTube. And some people can't get high and smoke weed, but I mean high smoke weed. Bitches, you high? Some people cannot get high and read a book. But to be honest with you all, the other day when I was reading to you all the Old Money book by Byron Tilley, when I was reading that book to you all and I was smoking and sipping reading, I keep thinking about the book. I just keep thinking about the book. Okay. So we're on chapter 1, No One's Crazy. I read the introduction and now we're moving on. So I started reading a little bit of this book because I just don't remember the book, because I could tell by certain highlights. Like I have, you haven't seen me with no pen, but I have highlights in this book and I have highlights here. So I'm just refreshing and rejogging my memory. I began reading the book and then I put it down. So my goal is to finish the book, but not finish the book by the end of this live. I'm going to spend about 30 more minutes to an hour with you all reading the book, depending on how good the book gets. However, I will stop. I'm going to have a stopping point, and there'll be a part 2 to reading this book, but we're going to finish this book by the end of September. All right. So, chapter 1, No One's Crazy. Let me tell you about a problem. It might make you feel better about what you do with your money and less judgmental about what other people do with theirs. People do some crazy things with money, but no one is crazy. Here's the thing. People from different generations, raised by different parents who earned different incomes and held different values in different parts of the world, born into different economies, experiencing different job markets with different incentives and different degrees of luck, learn very different lessons. Everyone has their own unique experiences with how the world works. And what you've experienced is more compelling than what you learned secondhand. So, all of us, you, me, everyone, go through life anchored to a set of values, go through life anchored to a set of views about how money works that vary widely from person to person. What seems crazy to you might make sense to me. The person who grew up in poverty thinks about risk and reward in the ways that the child of a wealthy banker cannot fathom if he tried. The person who grew up when inflation was high experienced something the person who grew up when the stable prices never had to. The stockbroker who lost everything during the Great Depression experienced something the tech worker basking in the glory of the late 1990s can't imagine. The Australian who hasn't seen a recession in 30 years has experienced something no American ever has. On and on, the list of experiences is endless. You know, stuff about money that I don't, and vice versa. You go through life with different beliefs, goals, and forecasts than I do. That's not because one of us is smarter than the other or has better information. It's because we've had different lives shaped by different and equally persuasive experiences. Your personal experiences with money make up about 0.0000001% of what's happened in the world, but maybe 80% of what you think the world of how you think the world works. So equally smart people can disagree about how and why recessions happen, how you should invest your money, and what you should prioritize, how much risk you should take on, and so on. In his book on 1930s America, Frederick Lewis Allen wrote that the Great Depression marked millions of Americans inwardly for the rest of their lives. End quote. But there was a range of experiences. 25 years later, as he was running for president, John F. Kennedy was asked by a reporter what he remembered from the Great Depression. He marked, mind you, this what John F. Kennedy said, y'all. This what John F. Kennedy said. John F. Kennedy says, "I have no first-hand knowledge of the Depression. My family had one of the greatest fortunes of the world, and it was worth more than ever then. We had bigger houses, more servants, we traveled more. About the only thing that I saw directly was when my father hired some extra gardeners just to give them a job so they could eat. I really did not learn about the Depression until I read about it at Harvard." This was a major point in the 1960 election. How people thought someone, how people thought, I'm still baffled by John F. Kennedy's words. This was a major point in the 1960 election. How people thought, could someone with no understanding of the biggest economic story of the last generation be put in charge of the economy? It was, in many ways, overcome only by JFK's experience in World War II. That was the other most widespread emotional experience of the previous generation, and something his primary opponent, Hubert Huffner, didn't have. The challenges for us is that no amount of studying or open-mindedness can genuinely recreate the power of fear and uncertainty. I can read about what it was like to lose everything during the Great Depression, but I don't have the emotional scars of those who actually experienced it. And the person who lived through it can't fathom why someone like me could come across as complacent about things like owning stocks. We see the world through a different lens. Spreadsheets can model the historic frequency of big stock market declines, but they can't model the feeling of income. They can't but they can't model the feeling of coming home, looking at your kids, and wondering if you made a mistake that will impact their lives. Studying history makes you feel like you understand something, but until you lived through it and personally felt its consequences, you may not understand it enough to change your behavior. We all think we know how the world works, but we've all only experienced a tiny sliver of it. As investor Michael Batnick says, some lessons have to be experienced before they can be understood. Okay, we are all victims in different ways to that truth. I got my door open. I have my front door open, so people are walking by, and the bugs are landing on my book. But again, I'm still reading because I want to understand the psychology of money and how money works. Old money, new money. When you get money, you have money, because sometimes you have money and the money comes and you're just like, oh, I have this money, I can do whatever I want with it, and you feel like it's going to come in and last forever, but it doesn't. I can read about okay. I can read about what it was like to lose everything during the Great Depression, but I don't have the emotional scars of those who actually experienced it. And the person who lived through it can't fathom why someone like me could come across as complacent about things like owning stocks. We see the world through a different lens. Spreadsheets can model the historic frequency of big stock market declines, but they can't model the feeling of coming home, looking at your kids, and wondering if you made a mistake that would impact their lives. Studying history makes you feel like you understand something, but until you lived through it and personally felt its consequences, you may not understand it enough to change your behavior. We all think we know how the world works, but we've all only experienced a tiny sliver of it. As investor Michael Batnick says, some lessons have to be experienced before they can be understood. We are all victims in different ways to that truth. In 2006, economist Ulrich Malmendier, sorry if I said your name wrong, and Stefan Nagel from the National Bureau of Economic Research dug through 50 years of the survey of consumer finances, a detailed look at what Americans do with their money. In theory, people should make investment decisions based on their goals and the characteristics of the investment options available to them at the time. But that's not what people do. The fuck? The Economist found that people's lifetime investments decisions are heavily anchored to the experiences those investors had in their own generation, especially experiences early in their adult life. If you grew up when inflation was high, you invested less of your money in bonds later in life compared to those who grew up when inflation was low. If you happened to grow up when the stock market was strong, you invested more of your money in the stocks later in life compared to those who grew up when the stocks were weak. The Economist wrote, our findings suggest that individuals, investors' willingness to bear their risks depend on personal history, not intelligence or education or sophistication, just the dumb luck of when and where you were born. The Financial Times interviewed Bill Gross, the famed bond manager, in 2019. Gross admits that he would probably not be where he is today if he had been born a decade earlier or later, the piece said. Gross's career coincided almost perfectly with a generational collapse in interest rates that gave bond prices a tailwind. That kind of thing doesn't just affect the opportunities you come across. It affects what you think about those opportunities when they're presented to you. To Gross, bonds were wealth-generating machines. To his father's generation, who grew up with and endured higher inflation, that might be seen as wealth incinerators. The differences in how people have experienced money are not small, even among those who think they are pretty similar. Take stocks. If you were born in 1970, the S&P 500 increased almost tenfold. Adjusted for inflation during your teens and 20s, that's an amazing return. If you were born in 1950, the market literally the market went literally nowhere in your teens and 20s adjusted for inflation. Two groups of people separated by chance of their birth year go through life with a completely different view on how the stock market works or inflation. If you were born in the 1960s, American inflation during your teens and 20s, your young impressionable years were your young impressionable years when you're developing a base knowledge about how the economy works sent prices up more than threefold. That's a lot. You remember gas lines and getting paychecks that stretched noticeably less far than the ones before them. But if you were born in 1990, inflation has been so low for your whole life that it's probably never crossed your mind. That's very interesting. Okay, and then they show a mark. I'm gonna show y'all the chart. I don't know if you can see the chart like I see it, but I guess I'll take the. Oh, y'all, I dropped y'all and locked y'all out. Okay, so this is what the chart looks like in the book. What stocks did in your teens and 20s, born in the 1950 to 1970. This release rebased to 1 at age 13. Look at the chart. So if y'all want to look at the chart like this, you can look at the chart. I think they're going to show another chart. So we will go on this chart. America's nationwide unemployment in November 2009 was around 10%. But the unemployment rate for African American males aged 16 to 19 without a high school diploma was 49%. For Caucasian males over age 45 with a college degree, it was 4%. Wow. Local stock markets in Germany and Japan were wiped out during World War II. Entire regions were bombed out. At the end of the war, German farms only produced enough food to provide the country's citizens with 1,000 calories a day. Wow. Compared to the U.S., where the stock market more than doubled from 1941 through the end of 1945, and the economy was the strongest it had been in almost 2 decades. So I'm just showing y'all the chart here. I'm going to turn the camera around. This is all new information to me. No one should expect numbers of these groups to go through the rest of their lives thinking the same thing about inflation, or the stock market, or unemployment, or money in general. No one should expect them to respond to financial information the same way. No one should assume they are influenced by the same incentives. No one should expect them to trust the same sources of advice. No one should expect them to agree on what matters, what's worth it, what's likely to happen next, and what the best path forward is. You know what's mind-boggling about reading this information is the unemployment rate for African Americans. Why do you want to talk about the one that says for African Americans aged 16 to 19 without a high school diploma was 49%? That's not a good comparison. It says the unemployment rate for African American males 16 through 19 without a high school diploma was 49%. For Caucasian females over age 45 with a college degree, it was 4%. Why are they comparing African Americans males 16 to 18 to Caucasian females over the age of 45 with a college degree? That's not a good comparison. Okay, moving along. Their view of money was formed in different worlds, and when that's the case, a view about money that one group of people think is outrageous can make perfect sense to another. A few years ago, the New York Times did a story on the working conditions of Foxconn, the massive Taiwanese electronics manufacturer. The conditions are often atrocious. Readers were rightly upset. But a fascinating response to the story came from the nephew of a Chinese worker who wrote in the comment section, My aunt worked several years in what Americans call sweatshops. It was hard work, long hours, small wage, poor working conditions. Do you know what my aunt did before she worked in one of those factories? She was a prostitute. The idea of working in a sweatshop compared to that old lifestyle is an improvement in my opinion. I know that my aunt would rather be exploited by an evil capitalist boss for a couple of dollars than have her body be exploited by several men for pennies. That is why I am upset by many Americans' ways of thinking. We do not have the same opportunities as the West. Our governmental infrastructure is different. The country is different. Yes, factory is hard labor. Could it be better? Yes, but only when you compare such to American jobs. I don't know what to make of this. Part of me wants to argue fiercely. Part of me wants to understand. But mostly it's an example of how different experiences can lead to vastly different views within topics that one-sided intuitively thinks should be black and white. This book is, I felt like the last book that I was read, it was more practical and it was applying information. This book is more about the history of finance, understanding the deep psychology of finance, understanding how money actually works, and understanding that it can differentiate depending on what year and where you were born. And those are factors that I didn't, even though they matter, I did not consider them before. So to me, that's why this book is very interesting. Let's proceed. Every decision people make with money is justified by taking the information they have at the moment and plugging it into their unique mental model of how the world works. Those people can be misinformed. They can have incomplete information. They can be bad at math. They can be persuaded by marketing. They can have no idea what they're doing. They can misjudge the consequences of their actions. Oh, can they ever? But every financial decision a person makes sense to them in that moment and checks the box that they need to check. They tell themselves a story about what they're doing and why they're doing it, and that story has been shaped by their own unique experiences. Take a simple example: lottery tickets. Americans spend more on them than movies, video games, music, sporting events, and books combined. And who buys them? Mostly poor people. The lowest income households in the U.S. on average spend $412 a year on lotto tickets, 4 times the amount of those in the highest income groups. 40% of Americans cannot come up with $400 in an emergency, which is to say, those buying the $400 in lottery tickets are by and large the same people who say they couldn't come up with $400 in an emergency. They are blowing their safety nets on something with a 1 in a million's chance of hitting it big. That seems crazy to me. It probably seems crazy to you too. But I'm not in the lowest income group. You're likely not either. So it's hard for many of us to intuitively grasp the subconscious reasoning of low income lottery ticket buyers. But strain a little and you can imagine it going something like this. We live paycheck to paycheck and saving seems out of the reach. Our prospects for much higher wages seem out of the reach. We can't afford nice vacations, new cars, health insurance, or homes in safe neighborhoods. We can't put our kids through college without crippling debt. Much of the stuff you people who read finance books either have now or have a good chance of getting, we don't. Buying a lottery ticket is the only time in our lives we hold a tangible dream of getting the good stuff that you already have and take for granted. We are paying for a dream, and you may not understand that because you already live in a dream. That's why we buy more tickets than you do. Bullshit. That is straight. It's true though. It's true. That is literally how some people view money, books. I don't believe in a lottery. Because I feel just how the book said, there's a 1 in a million chance of you hitting the lottery. I'm not about to be spending no money on no lottery. I'm straight. I don't buy lottery tickets. Alright. I pitched in. I was about 18 or 19 years old, and there was this group of people at my old job, and they were like, "Oh, we're all going to pitch in for the lottery and do this thing," and we did not win. And I was like, "Yeah, I don't believe in doing this." Okay, proceeding back to the book. You don't have to agree with this reasoning. Buying lotto tickets when you're still broke is still a bad idea. Buying lottery tickets when you're broke is still a bad idea. But I can kind of understand why lotto ticket sales persist. And that idea, quote, "what you're doing seems crazy, but I kind of understand why you're doing it," end quote, uncovers the root of many of our financial decisions. Few people make financial decisions purely with a spreadsheet. They make them at a dinner table or in a company meeting. Places where personal history, your unique own view of the world, ego, pride, marketing, and all incentives are scrambled together into a narrative that works for you. As important as another important point that helps explain why money decisions are difficult and why there is so much misbehavior is to recognize how new this topic is. Money has been around a long time. King Alliance of Lydia, now part of Turkey, is thought to have created the first official currency in 600 BC. But the modern foundation of money, decisions, savings, and investing is based around concepts that are practically infants. Take retirement. At the end of 2018, where there was $27 trillion in U.S. retirement accounts, making it the main driver of the common investor saving and investing decisions. But the entire concept of being entitled to retirement is most 2 generations old. Before World War II, most Americans worked until they died. That was the expectation and the reality. The labor force participation rate of men aged 65 and over was about 50% until the 1940s. That's interesting. Take retirement. At the end of 2018, there was $27 trillion in U.S. retirement accounts, making it the main driver of the common investor savings and investing decisions. But the entire concept of being entitled to retirement is at most 2 generations old. Before World War II, most Americans worked until they died. That was the expectation and the reality. The labor force participation rate of men aged 65 and over was about 50% until the 1940s. Labor participation rate for aged men 65. It declined significantly. Look at this chart, y'all. It declined significantly. Like, it used to be at 50% and it dropped all the way down to like the 2010s to 22%. Social Security aimed to change this, but its initial benefits were nothing close to a proper pension. When Ida Mae Fuller cashed the first Social Security check in 1940, it was $22.54. or $416 adjusted for inflation. It was not until the 1980s that the average Social Security check for retirees exceeded $1,000 a month adjusted for inflation. More than a quarter of Americans over age 65 were classified by the Census Bureau as living in poverty until the 1960s. There is a widespread belief along the lines of everyone used to have a private pension, but this is wildly exaggerated. The Employee Benefit Research Institute explains only a quarter of those over age 65 or older had pension income in 1975. Among that lucky minority, only 15% of household incomes came from a pension. The New York Times wrote in 1955 about the growing desire but continued inability to retire. To rephrase an old saying, everyone talks about retirement, but apparently very few do anything about it. This book is very, very interesting to me. But it's one of those books where you need to... I'm reading, but I'm processing slowly what I'm understanding because they're giving numbers and they're giving charts. And as I'm reflecting on what I'm reading, I want to really comprehend and understand it because a lot of this is a new information to me, hence why I'm reading the book. So, time's really been fucked up. This is what I'm reading. Time's really been fucked up. The New York Times wrote in 1955 about the growing desire but continued inability to retire. To rephrase an old saying, everyone talks about retirement, but apparently very few do anything about it. Yes, thank you so much, Viking. It was not until the late 1980s that the idea that everyone deserves and should have a dignified retirement took hold. And the way to get that dignified retirement ever since has been an expectation that everyone will save and invest their own money. Let me reiterate how new this idea is. The 401k, the backbone savings vehicle of American retirement, did not exist until 1978. The Roth IRA was not born until 1998. If it were a person, it would barely be old enough to drink. It should surprise no one that many of us are bad at saving and investing for retirement. We're not crazy. We're all just newbies. Same goes for college. The share of Americans over age 25 with a bachelor's degree has gone from less than 1 in 20 in 1940 to 1 in 4 by 2015. The average college tuition over that time rose more than fourfold adjusted for inflation. Something so big and so important hitting society so fast explains why, for example, so many people have made poor decisions with student loans over the last 20 years. There is not decades of accumulated experience to even attempt to learn from. We're winging it. Same for index funds, which are less than 50 years old, and hedge funds, which didn't take off until the last 25 years. Even the widespread of consumer debt, mortgages, credit cards, and car loans did not take off until after World War II, and when the GI Bill made it easier for millions of Americans to borrow. Dogs were domesticated 10,000 years ago and still retain some behaviors of their wild ancestors. Yet here we are with between 20 and 50 years of experience in the modern financial system, hoping to be perfectly acclimated for a topic that is so influenced by emotion versus fact. This is a problem, and it helps explain why we don't always do what we're supposed to with money. We all do crazy stuff with money because we're all relatively new to this game, and what looks like crazy to you might make sense to me. But no one is crazy. We all make decisions based on our own unique experiences that seem to make sense to us in a given moment. Now, let me tell you a story about how Bill Gates got rich. Huh. Okay, you're going to check out the book I'm reading. I'm going to close it up shop. I've been reading to you all for an hour. That's exactly what I plan to do. This book here is called The Psychology of Money. It's by Morgan Housel. It is a great read. PBG, open a retirement account if you don't have one already. I am Chica. Reading has helped. Reading has really helped educate me on the steps to take moving forward. I've had a lot of these books. Reading the information versus applying it are two different things. So, again, I'm reading The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. I've also gifted this book to a friend. When you buy the book, buy it for a friend as well. But give it to a friend that you know is going to read it. She wanted to have my book and she wanted to read it. But I said, no, girl, I'll buy you one. So I bought her a book. She got this book. I'm reading this book now after 3 years of having it. We've only gotten through the introduction in chapter 1. I will probably continue reading this book even offline. I'm going to put my bookmark in it. I've enjoyed reading to you all today. Happy Friday to you all. Don't know when I'll see you again, but best believe I'll see you sooner than later. The next time I get on here, it'll probably be to troll. I would troll, I just wanted to show off my substance. Show off, a girl got more than just talking shit. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for spending your time with me. Happy weekend to you. If you're partying, enjoy your Labor Day weekend as well. If you're partying, party responsibly, drink responsibly, be careful. Do not drink and drive. I want to see you again. Do not drink and drive. It's not good. No matter how good you feel, call a Uber, call a taxi, call a Lyft. Do not drink and drive. Okay? Drink responsibly. Y'all have a great Labor Day weekend. Enjoy yourselves. And I will see you sooner than later. Yeah, we could do a book club. You getting turned this weekend? You can get turned this weekend. Just do it responsibly. I love you all. Thank you all so much for supporting me. Be sure to subscribe. And I will see you sooner than later.